Morning. Let's just turn my notes the right way up. Well, welcome back. Welcome to the start of the formal start of day two of the conference. You heard yesterday in the opening session from Energy Minister Michael Fallon and Scottish Energy Minister Fergus Ewing. Now's the chance to hear from the Shadow Energy Minister, Tom Greatrix. I think Tom needs relatively little introduction. He's a friendly face and a well-known face for us in the renewables sector. It's his second time to join us at this conference. Interesting, Tom was recently told off by Utility Week for being too modest. So in terms of his knowledge about energy. So although he declares not to be an energy expert, I think we suspect something different, because he's certainly, in all my discussions with Tom, he's shown huge understanding and ability to embrace the issues that we're dealing with. So thank you for Tom for joining us. We thought we'd do something a little bit different this time and sort of work it on an informal interview basis. And really talk through some of the issues that we face. Now, you can imagine there's so much to talk about. I would happily, personally, might wear out Tom, sit here all day exploring the broad topics of the industry and what we face. So I'm quite deliberately going to focus very much on the offshore specific issues as they pertain to this sector. So perhaps we should crack on. I mean, Tom, I believe there's a general election next year. We've got about 300 days left before the general election. Could you share with us a little bit about how the Labour Party, a Labour government, if elected, would address the energy challenge, our energy challenges, and how your vision of renewables differs from the current government's?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, firstly, for inviting me along this morning. It's always good to be at RenewableUK conferences, particularly when you happen to have one that's 20 minutes from where I live, which is very welcome this morning. I suppose in terms of the Labour's agenda for energy and for renewables, we have been very clear over the period of time since the last general election that we see renewables and offshore wind within the renewable sector as being key towards the decarbonisation of our power supply, which needs to happen not just to meet our environmental commitments, but also as we renew energy infrastructure, which needs to be renewed, and there are a range of different options, and none of which are cost-free, but that actually it makes a lot of sense economically, in terms of wider economic benefits, to be able to, and for our energy security, for renewables and offshore wind to play a significant part of that. We set out in a green paper which we published last autumn a range of proposals which are different from where the government is, largely around ensuring that there's transparency in the way that the energy market works. That's important, I think, for the renewable sector, because it's about bringing confidence and clarity for consumers and therefore being able to make the case for the level of investment that needs to happen. We differ from the government, in the current government, in that the major party in the current government, I think the minority party, the Liberal Democrats, their policy is the same as us, although it's not something they've been able to deliver in government, but we support a 2030 decarbonisation target for power supply, and we've made very clear, I announced at this conference last year in Manchester that will be within our manifesto, and that is a commitment from us to deliver that, to help to bring a sense of direction for the sector as well. We're also proposing an energy security board to drive some long-term thinking and decision-making in terms of energy, because one of the things I've become aware of in the 2 and a bit years that I've been Shadow Energy Minister is the decisions that people in this room are involved in, projects are involved in, decisions that are being made, investments that are being made, are largely with a long-term timescale. You know, you're talking way beyond the lifetime of any government or even a number of governments in succession. So therefore, having a sense of long-term sense of direction and policy is crucial to be able to help those decisions to be made, and we think a provision of some advice and guidance from government, from an energy security board, is an important thing to do to set some long-term thinking alongside the sometimes more pressing short-term political considerations that we have to take into account. But I suppose my main point is that from the Labour perspective, we want to see renewables, and including offshore wind, thrive across the whole of the UK, because we think it's good for our energy needs. We think it's good for our wider economy, and we think it's good for the environment. And there's a great opportunity to be grasped. And I think with the right sense of direction from government, there are huge opportunities which I think will benefit very many people across the whole of the UK.
Sure, thank you. And are there any more specific thoughts about the role that renewables and how you get to a sort of sense of sizing the renewables contribution to that vision and that policy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the 2030 decarbonisation target isn't just a simplistic headline. I think it's absolutely crucial in giving a sense of direction and clarity about that sense of direction, from which come the opportunities to make decisions and to make investments on the basis of knowing that is the trajectory that the country has set. And targets sometimes are met, sometimes aren't met, but what they do is they focus people's efforts, and I think that's something which we need within the energy sector. Now, in relation to renewables within that, because there are a number of there are other low carbon technologies as well, and it's always been my position that we need a balanced energy supply. But taking into account all of the issues around deliverability, around cost, around public acceptability, I think it's pretty obvious that within that context of a drive towards 2030, renewables has a great opportunity to be able to make the case and make a significant contribution to that, and that's something I would welcome. And from a Labour Party perspective in government, we would seek to push all the way through our policy agenda, from the industrial policy agenda in terms of jobs and growth and the skills and those issues through education, particularly again on the issues around skills and being able to get people into those jobs and those skilled jobs that are likely to be outside of the southeast corner of our country, which is vitally important in terms of rebalancing the economy, and also in terms of our environmental commitments as well. So there's a huge opportunity here, and I think with that right sense of direction, that there's a lot that can be grasped, and something which is going to be good, as I said, for the whole of the UK, and therefore something which any government, any sensible government should be seeing as an important aspect of their policy agenda.
Sure, thank you. I mean, getting more specific, was when Labour was last in power, which is obviously 4 years ago at the moment. The appetite for offshore wind was certainly exceeded 20 gigawatts by 2020. I mean, what would a new Labour government's appetite be, and can we have our 10 gigawatts back?
Well, I think the opportunity is. I mean, I wouldn't want to put a hard and fast figure on where we would say we need to be on offshore wind specifically. But what I would say is that having that 2030 target is a good way of being able to drive policy and to focus attention on where we need to get to. That opens up that opportunity. I would like to see as much offshore wind as it's possible to do, frankly, because I think in terms of all of the balance of issues around the sort of the reliability of resource, around the industrial opportunities, and also some of the issues in relation to public concern and public acceptability, I think offshore wind is very strongly placed to make us, to have a significant part of that mix. But there's also then becomes I think an important responsibility for the industry as well, and that's around the opportunities to make clear to the public the contribution that offshore wind can make and does make, including in relation to jobs and wider economic activity, and also to be able to demonstrate in terms of cost that there is a real commitment to driving down costs through innovation, through collaboration, through using the institutions like the Catapult Centre, through the changes we were proposing in relation to the Green Investment Bank being able to take the full investment and borrowing powers earlier than is currently envisaged by the current government to really drive that activity. We know there is a huge need for investment in energy infrastructure. We also know that we are currently in a situation where interest rates are low. It seems to me bizarre that we aren't then using the institution of the Green Investment Bank properly now. We should be getting on with that. That's something as well we're committed to. All of those things mean that there is, I think, a great opportunity without putting a specific figure on it, because the figure, I think, can be driven by that sense of engagement, of collaboration and activity that could drive that beyond perhaps what the ambition may well have been a few years ago. And I think that ambition can be, if not unlimited, then certainly something which we don't need to set a figure on specifically, because we know there's a huge opportunity which, if grasped, can make a significant contribution.
Sure, thank you. I mean, obviously, in recent months, I mean, the Ed Miliband and Labour Party sort of stirred up the debate on electricity pricing.
Yeah.
Some fairly provocative comments. Just thinking about the effect of a review or major structural changes in the retail and generating businesses and the way the Big Six do business, what would be, do you think, the effect on offshore wind investment of separating out the retail and generating businesses and how we may enable the inertia to continue our investment?
Well, I think there's an important issue around transparency in the energy market, which lies behind a number of our proposals, including in relation to the ring-fencing between supply and generation business, which is important in terms of a bigger picture issue around confidence, which is important, I think, for investment more widely, particularly given that some of the investment that is required is probably going to come from sources who aren't currently engaged in the energy market in terms of pension funds and others. And I know actually from talking to a number of these that they want to be confident about the way the market operates and ensure that it's something which is clear and transparent. Secondly, a more direct impact, I think, is the separating of the generation and supply aspects of the business, combined with open trading of power on an open exchange with two-way auction process, forces liquidity into the market, which I think is important in terms of being able to buy and sell long-dated products, which I think has a benefit to players in the market, and particularly to independent generators who sometimes find it harder to get the long-term buyers for their products. I think that's important as well. I should also make the point that we, the Labour Party, supported through the Energy Bill, now the Energy Act, contracts for difference and a lot of aspects of EMR. And I think it's important as well that the changes that we're proposing are seen as complementary, not contradictory to those the things which are currently legislated and are in the process of being implemented. I think they help to complete a picture which gives clarity around the structure and operation of the market, which can aid confidence to get the investment in, because getting that investment in is going to be absolutely crucial over the next few years if we are to meet our targets, our binding targets, but also importantly to maximise the opportunities, the wider economic opportunities that can come from offshore wind and other renewables as part of that mix. Sure.
And just developing that thought about sort of the wider economic opportunities, what could a Labour government do to ensure the maximum economic benefit from offshore wind investment?
Well, actually,
particular things you could
do?
I
mean, the maximum economic benefit, in terms of jobs and jobs will come from the supply chain. The supply chain will come from being linked to manufacturing. Manufacturing will come, and I think it's one of the good things there's been. I know it's not your company, but the Siemens
never heard of
development in Humberside, which is a long time coming and talked about for a long time. And I know there are others that may well be in the pipeline. Is a massive benefit in this regard. Is that the jobs come from the supply chain, come from the manufacturing, and you get the manufacturing in by having a confidence that there is a market to manufacture in. And so the process of having that 2030 decarbonisation target as a headline commitment is vitally important to be able to drive all those things that follow. As well as that, using the level of collaboration and involvement there is between industry and universities and researchers, the catapult centres, which I think are a good thing, which the government established. All of those can help to identify where the opportunities are and also where the gaps might be, where the UK, through activity which is already happening, there can be focus on that activity to drive the wider economic opportunities. But most importantly, I think it's about government, whoever's in government, demonstrating they've got a commitment to this sector. And that means not making contradictory statements between ministers, even within the same department, which undermine the sense of direction and level of commitment there needs to be. I think those sort of high-level things are vitally important alongside the sort of the sort of specific issues around ensuring that the colleges that can train people, and we've got people here today from Fife College on apprenticeships here, but across other higher education institutions, the research that's going on in universities in aspects of the development and the sort of the associated aspects of work to renewables are all vitally important, and the government, through its wider industrial and economic policy, should be determined to make sure that we get those opportunities realised. And I think there's a whole range of policies that come across government, not just within the energy department, across business department, across education, as I've said, those arguments being properly marshalled can help make a massive difference. And that's something, when I talk to my colleagues, my shadow ministerial colleagues, is something that's very clearly on their agenda, because without it, the opportunities to rebalance the economy sectorally and geographically are undermined and diminished. And we're all focused on the need to be able to get long-term skilled, well-paid jobs into the economy.
And you mentioned the catapult and, as you say, some of the strong relationships that are being built with the universities. If you were Energy Minister, are there any additional sort of specific things that you think would be appropriate for government to do? I mean, we launched the conference yesterday with the sort of message that all renewables are on this digression curve to standing up on their own merits, but there's a cost challenge there. Is there anything specific that a Labour Energy Minister could do to encourage and facilitate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that your point about that digression is very important, and that's obviously what everybody wants to see. But the speed of that digression is informed and influenced by the wider policy agenda, and that's something which any energy minister of whichever political persuasion or party needs to be absolutely aware of, and that's why the point I made about mixed messages is so significant. But in terms of specifics, the involvement of the business department in terms of having the sort of the various different sectoral strategies, making sure that is something which is, I hate using this term, but I'm going to use it because I can't think of another one, is sort of mainstreamed into the work which then is carried out both within the government departments and then also through the various different economic partnerships and agencies around the country, is something which really needs to be a focus of, in terms of driving this agenda. At the high level, and I know I've said it about 4 times, I'm going to say it again, that 2030 decarbonisation target is absolutely crucial to giving the sense of direction that then can influence some of those things, that sit underneath that. In terms of regional development and industrial development, there are good examples that have happened in other sectors in different parts of the country. I think the important thing that government should be doing is not trying to reinvent the wheel each time, but to learn and develop from those opportunities, and to use all of these different bodies and mechanisms to be able to drive that wider economic activity. And that's something, whether it's a minister in the energy department or the business department or a combination of the two, as we currently have, needs to have right at the heart of their agenda. And also, frankly, to be very upfront about saying that this is important, because I'm just listening to the end of the session before in terms of the opportunities there are for SMEs and other companies in some of the things, the projects that are happening and being developed. Then I think it's incumbent upon the government, whoever the government is, to be making very, very clear that this is something which is important as a political priority, that those opportunities are available to UK-based companies as far as they can be delivered by UK-based companies, and because that benefits all of us, and I think it's vital that is part of the agenda as well.
Great, thank you. Now, you're sporting a very nice red badge on your left lapel. You're an Englishman from the southern counties.
Yeah.
You're a Labour MP, and you represent a constituency just to the south of Glasgow.
Yep.
There's this little matter of a Scottish referendum. Perhaps you could share with us what do you think the impact of that would be on our industry and the continued investment in offshore wind?
Yeah, well, you know, I know you had the S&P energy spokesman here yesterday, who I'm sure will have been saying, giving you his sort of perspective on this, and he's a nationalist, I'm not a nationalist. Votes will cancel each other out, and you know, I just don't like the idea of making it more difficult for the single energy market which we currently have to consider. Now, the S&P assert that it will continue as a matter of certainty post independence. It's something which I'm concerned about as an MP with a Scottish constituency, and including people who work in the energy sector and some in the renewable energy sector in my constituency. And so I've challenged the government a number of times on this, and they make the point that the existing situation can't be expected to continue as a matter of course. And I suppose the issue is that were those of us who have a vote in this referendum to vote for Scotland to leave the UK, then it inevitably changes the relationship between the rest of the UK and then Scotland, because you will be, Scotland will be a separate state from the rest of the UK. That is a proposition that's going to be put to people in just a little bit under 100 days' time. And the impact in terms of the renewable sector is, as everybody is well aware, the support for renewables is paid for through contributions made by bills across every consumer across the whole of the UK. Now, I think actually it's a positive part of the current situation that a significant proportion of that, about a third of that support, goes to generation in Scotland. It's paid for by people across the whole of the UK. Everybody in all parts of the UK benefit from the power that's generated. But if we change that, we're in a situation where then a case has to be made for the rest of the UK to be purchasing additional power from Scotland. Now, that then becomes an economic decision. It's a commercial decision, and the likelihood is, I think, my concern would be in relation to offshore wind, particularly in some of the projects that have got through planning approval and some of those that are in the pipeline as well, is that how you can justify and make the case to consumers in England and Wales and Northern Ireland that they should be paying on their bill for support for development of renewables in what would then be a separate neighbouring foreign country, I think is a difficult case to be able to make. And that, I think, will make it. And then what happens in Scotland is, what does Scotland then do? Potentially find a way of paying through taxation. But then there are other issues in terms of pressure on public spending. So taxes may need to increase to counter that, or perhaps the support regime will be different. There are a whole range of different factors which I think create a huge amount of uncertainty right at the very wrong time for the offshore sector. I think it's been much better to, people's decision, I think very few people's decision will be on the basis of this issue. But on this issue, I think it's something which I don't think there can be any complacency about, just assuming on the basis of an assertion that is made by one party in this, that something that has been established over a number of years would continue inevitably, because I think it's far from certain that it would be. And I think that creates a huge amount of uncertainty for what then happens afterwards, which I think would be much better to do without. I think our energy future is much better served by being able to pool and share that support to develop resources across all of the UK. And, in terms of offshore wind, we just look at the figures now to see where is the offshore wind currently connected and generated, and where has the expansion been. And it's been largely, almost all, in English and Welsh waters, partly because a lot of the Scottish projects are further out, deeper, they're more expensive. Being able to justify how then someone else will pay for that, I think, is something which is a very, very crucial concern in the whole of this debate, and something which I think helps to make the case for continuing a single energy market, which actually the SNP say they want to happen. But that runs counter to the rest of their proposition, which is for Scotland to leave the UK, but retain a single energy market with people from the rest of the UK continuing to pay the support. I think that's a very hard case to be able to make to people in the rest of the UK for them to continue to do that. I think that's a very real concern that everybody who's involved in this sector, whether you've got a vote on the 18th of September or not, need to be aware of and cognizant of over the next few months, because what will then come afterwards, I think, will be a considerably lengthy period of uncertainty, which could end up having a difference as to whether some of the projects that we want to see happen in round 3 and offshore in Scotland, whether they happen or they don't happen.
Thank you. Now, we have got time for questions. Are there any questions from the audience? One here, gentleman.
We sat and watched 4 countries talk about their offshore yesterday. There was Holland, Germany, France and Denmark. And I noticed that Denmark, with a population of 5 million, was miles ahead of all the other large countries in their offshore renewables. So I just don't see how that can square with what the Shadow Minister is saying about that you need the broad shoulders of a big country in order to go ahead.
So what was the question?
Well, that was just to see if we could...
It was an observation more than a...
Well, I'd be interested to see the Minister a point about that.
Well, the point I'm making is that currently the support for renewables is shared across all of the UK. Disproportionately, that comes to Scotland because that's where a lot of the generation happens, and that's a benefit that we can share of. The issue is that if I take it from the tenor of your comments and your shout from before that you'll be voting the opposite way to me on the 18th of September. So
I'm not a nationalist as well.
So you'll be voting a different way. You'll be voting, I presume, from your comment for Scotland to leave the UK, which is, your position and your view, and will be the view of others, and we'll see what the result is on the 8th of September. The issue then is, though, the assertion that continued sharing of costs across all of the UK consumers effectively paying the support for renewable generation in Scotland, is not something that you can guarantee will continue. And I think that's a very real issue in terms of future development and the development of future offshore wind projects off the shores of Scotland.
How does Denmark manage?
Well, it isn't. It's about now where that support comes from for every decision that's being made and every potential planning application and every investment that's being mooted that's happening in the UK is on the basis of understanding that support is shared across all of the UK, regardless of where the generation comes from or where it happens. The situation would be, if we were to leave the UK, that would then be a decision where there'd be different factors then about how that's done in Scotland. Now, that would mean a significant increase in the contribution that people have to pay through their bills, or it would mean an increase in taxation to account for that difference, that scale difference, because it's less than 10% of the population and more than a third of the support happens currently. So there would have to be a change in the way that would work. Now, if there is a change in the way that would work, that will take some time to work through. And I think just in terms of the timescale of this, that is precisely the wrong time for this sector, given the ambition and given what we've been talking about, and given some of the projects which have planning consent, and even some of the projects which have so far received support even through the FID enabling process, including the Beatrice project, for example, which is on the basis of being able to do that through the support which comes across the whole of the UK, which, from my concern about this, I've questioned the government about, and they have said very clearly they can't guarantee will continue in exactly the same way afterwards, because then the rest of the UK will then, if they need to purchase power from somewhere else, they'll do that on the basis of a commercial decision. And whether or not that ends up being, there'll be different choices to make through interconnection, there'll be different choices through development of renewable technologies within what would be the rest of the UK's waters and not onshore. And don't forget that National Grid have made clear in their assessment that if they so chose to do so, the rest of the UK could meet their commitments without having to do that from Scotland. So it just creates all of these issues, which I think are a huge distraction from what we should be trying to achieve in renewables and in the energy sector across the whole of the UK.
Thank you. Question here? The microphone just heading your way.
quick comment. Denmark had a considerable head start over us, but would a Labour government tend to curtail onshore wind development, despite the fact that here and in the United States, particularly, it's approaching parity with fossil fuels, in favour of offshore wind in a proactive way? Is my first question. My second question is, would you be able to give us a brief view on Labour's views on shale gas?
Okay.
Going a little bit off-piste with the shale gas question.
Yeah. Well, I get asked about shale gas all the time. In relation to the first point in terms of onshore wind, then no is the short answer, because I just think that the statement from the Conservative Party about their position post-2015, I think is, I just don't think makes any sense. We are much better, if we have a drive towards decarbonisation, then and within that, renewables taking a significant part of that, there are different ways to do that, and there will be, I still think, a place for onshore wind, and you shouldn't be sort of seeking to say, well, we've got enough of that, and then we'll just do something else. I think we still need to be able to make some choices from a range of projects as they develop and as they come forward, and I'm sure there will be, and there should be, a significant continuing contribution from onshore wind into the future. In relation to shale gas, I think one of the frustrations I have with the debate about energy is the way in which, from time to time, something comes along and people say it's the magic bullet that solves all our energy problems. I don't think shale gas is that in relation to the UK. I think its impact in terms of price is likely to be limited, and if there is any impact, we don't know. Nobody knows how much is extractable. You won't know till the exploration happens. There are very legitimate concerns that very many people have around the process of that, and that has to be properly regulated. But I think the worst thing that could happen is to sort of suggest that we'll just leave everything else aside because we'll focus on shale gas because that's going to solve all our problems is a massive misreading of the situation. We will continue to need gas. We need gas for heating, not as well as peaking electricity capacity. I think for many years to come, 80% of our heating comes from gas, and even with the development of renewable heat technologies, there's still going to be, I think, a significant need for gas in the near future. So I'm not saying you should necessarily rule it out, but you need to be able to do it within the context of, given how much gas that we currently import. We import more now than we produce indigenously in the UK, but it's got to be in the context of of a wider agenda towards decarbonisation. Then it becomes about the gas that you do need, where you get that from, and it's a big if, because it's certainly unproven at the moment, if it's possible to get, with robust regulation and comprehensive monitoring, to get local consent for extraction to happen, it may be that can help displace some of what we import from Qatar and other places. And there are various different assessments in terms of the carbon intensity of that process if that comes from indigenously produced unconventional gas. But this is going to be something I think is going to be more at the margins than as a mainstay, and we shouldn't see it as a distraction from the wider agenda that we need to continue on if we're going to have any chance of meeting not just our environmental obligations, but also to have a much more sustainable, balanced energy mix for the future.
Thank you. Time for one last question. Gentleman here.
Hello, it's Max Karkas from Kailulum. Tom, you made a very good commitment to the carbon target 2030. Obviously, what's also important is all the steps that are required then to fulfill that goal. And clearly, when you look at renewables, it's all about the speed of investment and how quickly we can accelerate that. Now, one of the questions I guess a lot of the people in this room will have around offshore wind is a particular project going to be within the budget within a period, or is it out of it? Where do I rank in the order of projects? And this is within the context of the levy control framework that's been established around a certain number picked up by Treasury. And there's uncertainty about its flexibility, about what's in that budget. Is it capacity payments for fossil fuel generation or not? And what comes forward in the future. And I wonder if you would look to make some commitments around looking at that levy control framework and giving some clarity on that for the industry going forward to inform those investment decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the levy control framework, I mean, this is important to the time frame beyond 2020, and the point is obvious in terms of some of the projects that we're talking about that will not get there before 2020, and it's impossible to do so. So they're looking at that and that work doesn't sort of, you can't start that at 2020. So it's something which I think whoever is in government from 2015 will have to make their position very clear on very quickly after the election. In terms of the continuation of the LCF, I can't see how it can be. I think that will need to happen. In terms of the level of that and what's included within that, that's something which, from a Labour perspective, if we win the election next year, then that's something which will have to be done pretty quickly after that election to be able to set that framework. We can't do it really effectively beforehand, because beforehand, we haven't got the ability to be able to see all of the financial information in terms of there's some questions which you've articulated around exactly what's included and what's not, and the assessment and the sort of analysis that's made by the government as to what is within the LCF. So we couldn't legitimately properly do that ahead of the election, but I think it's something which needs to be done by whoever's in government pretty quickly after the election, because otherwise we run the risk of having a rush to try to get in before 2020 and then a big a pause for afterwards, and that will then disrupt the sort of the pipeline of projects, and also disrupt the opportunities and abilities, some of the things we were talking about earlier in terms of supply chain and getting economic benefit and getting costs down by having that sort of gap in the middle of it. So it's something which I'm very well aware of. I've made it my business to make sure that my colleagues in our shadow Treasury team are very well aware of as well, and so it's something which is certainly on our agenda to be able to do, but can only do that from an informed basis, so wouldn't be able to do that ahead of the election.
Terrific. Tom, thank you very much. It's, as always, it's a pleasure, and thank you for being so open with us. I have to ask the last question. If you became, if Labour was successful in getting into government, do you aspire to following through and doing what is currently a shadow job in real life and becoming the Energy Minister? Can we expect you to take that?
It's not my call. It's others that make those decisions. I would just say that in the 2.5 years that I've been shadowing energy, I think I've been incredibly privileged to do so, because it's a fascinating issue, fascinating subject. There's huge potential, huge opportunities, and I'm sure whoever is doing that job, if Labour's in government from 2015, will do so with real commitment and a real sense of wanting to see renewables and offshore wind succeed as part of the agenda going forward to 2020. Whether it's me or whether it's somebody else, I'm sure it's something which will be very central to the Labour government's positions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, could you extend our thanks to the Thanks very much.